Okay, I'm not great at explaining things. I said this in a previous video, but in this video, I'm gonna try my hardest to basically explain tanking in Tower of Fantasy, or at least like a guide to how you should be tanking, tricks and stuff that you need to know for tanking, and then my experience from playing tank, because when I first started playing this game, I chose tank at the very start, and that's all I've been using since I've been playing this game since it released for global. Alright, so there's three main things that you want to know how to do as a tank. There's holding aggro, triggering your Phantasia, which is your dodge skill, and staying alive, of course. You don't want a tank to die, because that'd just be stupid. Alright, so holding aggro. In this game, aggro works off of, if we're not counting the tank build for fortitude, aggro goes off whoever's doing the most damage. Because of fortitude, tanks get a base increase of aggro, which is by a lot. So remove that percentage of other people's damage, and then that's your aggro. I'm not going to go into like too deep. I don't know any of like the actual numbers for details on that. This game doesn't show everyone's DPS per second whilst you're fighting, so figuring that out would be like a pain in the ass. But yeah, so aggro will be working off the damage, but for tanks, you already have some aggro. But if someone out DPS's the aggro that you're holding, that's when things go wrong. So you want to use weapons that have aggro on them. So for me, I have Saki at the moment. Her hold left mouse button skill, that gives you aggro. And there's a few other weapons that also give you aggro in the game at the moment for tanks. Land's one skill also gives you aggro. This character's also, whenever you switch to the weapon, for a few seconds you taunt as well, and it has a cooldown. Huma's discharge skill also gives you a taunt for a few seconds, which draws aggro to you. And I think that's it for all the weapons that give aggro. So if you are playing tank, you want to try and get Saki, Lan, Huma, and I can't remember his character's name, but her weapon, if you want to help aggro if someone is doing so much damage that they're taking aggro from you, from your base aggro, from the tank resonance. Hey, next thing is triggering Phantasia and learning how to dodge. You just saw a second ago that Saki can trigger Phantasia, but it's a blue version, not a pink. This is from her A3, I think it is. I don't want to waffle too much about her weapon too much. I'm not A3, A5. Yeah, A5 triggers Phantasia from that. Alright, so let's go find an enemy real quick. And I'll show you how to trigger normal Phantasia. he's dead in this channel already. That's great. Okay, I'll use an NPC. If I don't kill him. Okay, so if you time your dodge correctly, you'll trigger this, which is your Phantasia. Phantasia will slow enemies inside it, and it will instantly build up a discharge fully for your weapons. It also has a, I think it's a 20-30 second cooldown. I can't remember how long it is, which you can't trigger, but once that goes away you can trigger it again and that bubble will come up. Phantasia for tanking, because you're the main target, you have to be, if I remember correctly, it's easier if you're a tank because you can time your dodge when a boss is attacking you to move out the way when they're attacking you. If you time the dodge correctly, you'll trigger all the time. The timing for the dodge can be a tricky one to learn. From what I've learned is dodge the moment you see the enemy about to attack, not when they're about to hit you. I played too many games where if a boss is just about to hit you, then you dodge, you get an iframe. In this game, it's just as they're about to initiate the attack, you dodge. Not when they're about to hit you. Why did I teleport over here? Oh, I had to go to Lucia. Alright, the next part with tanking, I know there's going to be a lot of loading screens in this video. The next part of tanking is learning to stay alive. Now, this is like a controversial thing that I've been going through with a lot of people who try playing out tank, is they are very squishy and they don't learn how to dodge enemies. So a key thing that a tank must know is basically practice fighting bosses and enemies for like ages. Oh my god, someone's gone through bosses already. Like, practice fighting bosses, learn their attack patterns, learn their different, like, abilities that happen and stuff. Learn to dodge them. Like, dodging, you only get 3 dodges with your stamina, and then it has to wait to go back up. If you just waste those by moving around and attacking, then you have a higher chance of getting hit by the boss. But if you time those correctly, even if you're not trying to trigger Phantasia for dodging, you will still get a resist damage and not get hit by any damage if you dodge correctly. I mean, everyone should be doing this, even DPSs, but tanks especially should be doing this because you don't want to be taking damage. A good tip for tanks though, don't dodge every attack. If you've been practicing and learning a boss, you should know that the light hits you should be taking, and then heavy hits that you've learned that are heavy, you should be dodging those. The way that you can take lighter hits is if you have certain characters. So for a second, if I switch to Meryl, I gain a shield. The shield has a counter knockbacks, so I can't get knockback whilst I have this shield on. And then the same for Saki's shield that she gets. Whilst I have this shield on, I can't get knocked back. So having weapons and skills that stop you from getting knocked back as a tank is very important, because you don't want to be knocked back, because that will stop you from using skills to taunt, do damage, and hold aggro for your team. Also, because you have anti-knockback, it means you can stay still in one place all the time. I need to go find a boss so I can actually like demonstrate fighting a bit easier. Alright, and yeah, I've explained trying to not get CC'd a little bit. But another feature is with staying alive, again, it's self-sustain. Like tanks, you can rely on healers for healing you, but as a tank, you want to basically make sure you can keep yourself alive whilst fighting a boss. Like if you can solo stay alive fighting a boss, if you're in a party, it'll make healers' job much easier to keep themselves alive and the DPS is alive, and they don't have to worry about the tank too much. Because you don't want a healer standing right next to the tank, because they're going to get hit by the boss, take damage, and probably kill themselves. You want to be in front of the boss. You want to be in front of the boss like this. And you want to have healers and DPSs behind the boss. With shielding, you want to make sure that you keep like any shield skill that you have, just keep it going and stop damage from the boss from happening. Self-healing, I mean, you could go for like 2 tank weapons and a healer weapon, and that'll be your self-sustain as a healer weapon. For example, I've taken damage, I use Lyra's 1 skill, I now get healing, I'm now self-sustaining my healing. I use Saki's shield, trigger Phantasia, and I can get knockback anymore whilst I have to shield up. I keep doing that, draw aggro, shield. Alright, so this is a good example to do basic combat because there's a boss here. Basic combat, like I said, you want to stand still as much as you can, and light hits you can take if you're a tank. With Saki, I can trigger Phantasia, but if you don't have Saki, you want to be dodging the attack and triggering Phantasia as much as you can. With Saki, I can keep throwing aggro and putting a shield on myself. Same with Mel if I use her switch weapon. And then Lyra, I can give myself a healing. So I'm self-sustaining. As a tank, I want to stay still. I don't want to be like dodging around, moving to the side, going behind the boss, because that'll make it awkward for your DPSs and healers to stay alive and get out of the way of damage. Right, a bit of like one-to-one experience with me playing tank since global released is like you don't need to have too much damage. Because of the fortitude resonance, you can have a lot of aggro, but you want to make sure that you have, again, I've said this at the beginning of the video, you want to have characters that have Taunt on them, but you don't need damage. Like if we look at my stats, I have 16k frost attack. People who are main DPSs at Wales at the moment have like 32k whatever element they are. So they have double the attack of me, and they probably have tons of damage matrices and stuff and great combos. Like when I've done raids, I'd see me doing like 1% of the damage and someone doing like 50%. So I'd be doing like maybe 5 mil damage, and they'd be doing 100 mil damage. Yet throughout the entire fight, I'd be holding aggro. Now, that sounds crazy. How am I holding aggro? It's because my rotation with Saki constantly triggering her taunt, and then making sure I'm rotating between the skills for my other characters. Then going back to Saki, triggering a Taunt, going back to other characters, few seconds, 5 seconds is gone, triggering a Taunt, going back to other weapon, going back to Saki, triggering a Taunt, just keep triggering Taunt. And no matter how little damage you're doing, you should bring up your aggro meter to be able to hold aggro against basically any DPS. Right, people probably want to know, like, okay, so what build should I be using for tank? Like, what builds do I use for tank? What should I be using? Like, people love to know what to use, people want to be shown like examples of how to play the game and how to play it. So from my experience with what I think is a good tank build, you don't have to play this. This is just from my experience of playing. So my tankiest build that can still hold aggro against people, or only just at the moment, because there's some crazy whales right now. My build is Lyra, Saki, and Meryl. Lyra because in a tank build with Benediction, no more Benediction, Fortitude, sorry. With Fortitude, when I use her one skill and it lands on a boss, you saw earlier that I was getting a healing buff. Because I don't have the pillars like in the healer build. I use my one skill, and I get this. Recover 2% of max HP per second for 20 seconds. That's my healing. That's my main healing that my character gets. Also, because I'm using Lyra, every healing that you do to yourself, because I'm not in healer mode, I get a shield. I get a stack of shield, or armor should I say, whilst I heal. This is brilliant for tanking, because even if a healer has Lyra and they're giving you a shield from their healing, this means my self-sustain healing is also giving me a shield as well. So it's like double healing gives you shielding. And with Saki, again, she's my main aggro. And then she also gives me another shield on top of Lyra's armor that she gives me. He also helps trigger Phantasia whenever I want to, but that's like starring. If you don't have starring, you can still use her for the shielding and the anti-CC from the shielding. And you want aggro from her. Then Meryl, a lot of people hate on Meryl because of this ice that she puts down and you can't move out of it or anything. But her shield is based off your HP, and it is a thick shield that you get, and it's every time you switch to her weapon. You have like a short cooldown, you switch to her weapon again, and you just gain this massive chunk of shielding. This shield also stacks with Lyra's shielding that you get from healing. So if I heal up right now, and I max out the shield from Lyra, I then, from Lyra, and then I switch to Meryl. Look at that shield that I have right now. That's a pretty big shield. And then Saki as well, a lot of people don't know. In her tank build, in her Fortitude, her one skill, if I take damage, when I take damage that is, her one skill even if you don't hit an enemy, if you use it, you get a lot of healing from it. Like, that's a crazy amount of healing. It doesn't scale off attack or anything, it just does that much healing from level. Another trick that I use for tanking, which a lot of people don't know about, is Relics. Now, people know about Corp with the Type 2 one. It now gives a defense buff when you use it. When it explodes, it gives you some defense. But one that people don't know about is cybernetic arm. If you get this to max stars, you get a reduced final damage from targets by 30% for 7 seconds. Now, cybernetic arm has 3 uses. You don't even need to hit a boss. You can just hit the ground and it will trigger it. You can see this stack here is the damage reduction. When that goes away, use it again, you get the shield. And look, its cooldown's already coming back around. It's about to go away. I use it. I get another final damage reduction down. But another neat thing about Cybernetic Arm is if you use it on an enemy and it hits them and you go towards them, you gain, I think it's like third or maybe just a third to half charge of your discharge. If I use it now, look at that. Maybe a fourth, third-ish, fourth, third, around a third charge for your discharge. Like, this can help with discharge build up for a tank, because you're not meant to be doing damage. I know it's gonna be downtime, like whilst you're doing this, it's downtime from attacking, but that doesn't matter too much if you're just pulling aggro skills and attacking. So I will be constantly rotating, using Saki to aggro, using this to build up charge, using skills attacks, switching back to Saki, aggroing, using skills to build up charge, using Saki discharge, building up my bubble, discharging, going back to Saki because it's been 5 seconds, using skills, switching back, and then I get my reset, using arm again. Like, you just want to keep switching between Saki to try and get her aggro. I mean, that's the build that I use, or at least at the moment I use. But since LAN came out in 2.4, LAN, like, I've been using her in a build recently, and instead of using Meryl, I've been using Coco for buffing, because now LAN is like she buffs people with her trait.
Can I help you?
Oh yeah, I didn't mention about Saki trait. Saki trait, basically, your HP goes too low, you're gonna gain a lot of resistance, which is a crazy amount. Like, HP go below 70%, you gain all resistance by 40%, and then frost is 60%. Like, this is an insane amount, and then every time you use your left mouse button to get shield, whoever's got the lowest HP also gains a shield like this for 3 hits. So they also gain the same shield that you're using. But with LAN's interesting. So I'll be using Saki to aggro and get my shield up. But then LAN, I'll be using her discharge to get her like umbrellas out, and then I'll be using her 1 skill. And when you use her 1 skill, when these go off, each of these count as a taunt when you use her skill. As long as one of these hit, they will taunt. So you want to make sure when you're just attacking with any weapon, like this could be any weapon, you'll be putting down the umbrellas. And then you want to use your one skill, and that will taunt. Then Saki, that will taunt. Use her discharge. Use her taunt. Use Saki, that's another taunt. And for me right now, that's like the best like aggroing that I can do without using the hammer. But the hammer's absolutely garbage for taunting. Because it's a 20-second cooldown for a taunt, which is a long time to not be taunting. And the weapon itself is like bad damage and is very slow. And then Huma's taunt is on a discharge. And a discharge doesn't do much damage. And it's a waste of a discharge skill that you could be using for Saki, which does her taunt on her discharge and a left mouse button. I've been waffling for a long time, but I kind of want to demonstrate this in a actual like situation when I'm fighting something. So if I'm lucky, let's see if someone is doing any of the bosses, or I can go do a boss and see if I can taunt with them. And showing holding aggro and using all my skills to keep me alive. I took off a Matrix from her. I can go into Matrixes, but that's like brain dead stuff. So like, because you're a tank, you want things that can help with shatter. You want damage over time, and if you freeze things, it does more damage. And then like things that do damage reduction. Yeah, it's just boring stuff. It doesn't really matter too much. Like, your actual gameplay matters more than using matrices. I'm gonna try and do a boss. And show you me holding aggro. Should I do this one? I prefer to do an actual joint art. Alright, let's just go for this one. Continue, match, make. Should I use my normal build? Let's use my normal build. This is my not so aggro build, but it's my tankiest build, which isn't even my like dammiest build. And I'll show you how my rotation works, me staying alive because of my rotation, and me holding aggro at the same time, even though I'm doing like no damage compared to everyone else. But yeah, one thing that most people make a mistake with when they're doing tank builds, like I don't see anyone backing into resistance. You want to be as chunky as you can, because as long as you're rotating correctly with aggro skills, you will be holding aggro the entire time. Yes, you need to do a certain amount of damage, otherwise some whales will just completely cancel out your taunting. but as long as you're doing a fair minimal amount of damage and taunting, you'll be able to hold aggro. So anyone who's new to tank, there are builds that you can do with certain characters. But at the moment, the best taunter, even though Lan has just came out, the best taunter at the moment is still Saki. Just because it's such a short cooldown, every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds you can keep taunting with her. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's why I can hold aggro so well at the moment with my tank build, as long as I have Saki in my team. And then the next best taunter is Lan, who's just come out with a 1 skill. I think it's like a 10 second, 15 second cooldown. And then probably the next best taunter would be Huma, and then the hammer. Because Huma, as long as you discharge really quickly, you can keep taunting, but it's such a useless one. That's why most people use hammer if they need that extra taunt. Oh, come on. I did not want to do that. I shall probably cut this off and show an example. I couldn't find a join up, so I'm just gonna try and get a team for doing Rudolph. And basically try and show my rotation and holding aggro against people. I don't know if these people are going to be whales or if they're going to have high damage, but they're obviously going to have more damage than me. And I have very low attack stats when playing this game. So I'm just gonna start a party. I mean, we can have a look at other people's stats. So this person, 24,000 attack, 24,000 attack. So they got about 10,000 more attack than me. This person, surprisingly, other attack. They got low gear. But full quests here. They're low end game. I've been able to hold aggro against whales who have like 30k attack, which is like the most that people have been having at the moment, which is a crazy amount. Alright, so I'm gonna try and explain my rotation when I'm fighting the boss with the build that I'm using. So Lyra healing, Saki aggro, Mel will be my shielding, and then using grapple as more shielding and using core as even more shielding. Alright, let's see if there's any crazy whales in here. So you have 33k flame damage. Who's here? So let's fight. Using Saki to aggro, use discharge core, Meryl the shield, and I'm gonna damage through Meryl for a bit. Building up the discharge, using Saki to aggro even more. Using grappling to shield, using Lyra to use the healing, switching to aggro, shielding, damage, aggroing, bring up the bubble, discharging to get shield. I mean, that died very quickly, but most of that fight, you can see me lose aggro for a little bit, but then gain it back. I kind of spent a long time like waffling in this video, but what people should be able to take from it is, as a tank, you need to learn bosses' attack patterns to stay alive, because you need to stay alive as a tank. Damage isn't a priority as tank. Like, I've proven that you don't need to do damage as a tank to be able to hold aggro against people. Like, with my stats, I've got like minimal amount of attack. Like, this is new player, just started playing attack, but I've put all my stuff into resistance and defense and HP. Not even that much HP. I've seen people with more HP than me, but basically you can hold aggro even if you don't have damage, which is what you're meant to do. You're meant to stay alive as a tank, not do damage. Your DPSs should be doing damage for you. And then I've shown which weapons can taunt for you, which ones are the best for taunting. I've shown how dodging works, when you should dodge. You shouldn't dodge on light attacks, you should only dodge on heavy attacks, because it's a waste of your dodge, and your dodge will be triggering Phantasia. Unless you have Saki, where you can just trigger it straight away with your L&B hold skill. I've then shown like characters that give you shielding. My build, my personal build, where I shield myself, and then I use Lyra as my healing, and then Lan later on with her build, you spam her one button and you can keep taunting. I've also then gave you a tip with Taunt gives you defense, and then cybernetic arm is like godly with final damage reduction from enemies with a shielding from it. Annoyingly, this doesn't work in the new D area that they add in 2.4. So instead, I've been using the drone, which just attacks convert 20% of damage dealt into HP. It's just a self-healing one, because there's no other relic that gives damage reduction. It's decent. But yeah, the main key point from this video is tanks don't need to be doing damage. Like, I see way too many people trying out tank now because of Lan coming out. They use her as a DPS, but they still go as like a tank build with Humor, Lan, and then Lin as like a DPS thing. Like, yeah, you'll be able to taunt and hold aggro from people because you've got tons of damage and you've got taunt skills because you're in the tank fortitude resonance. But you're going to be squishy. You're going to die instantly if you take damage from the bosses. And in what is it, Void Abyss or Void Abyssal, the bosses in here, especially the last boss, does so much damage. if you're one of these squishy tanks where you've just come from a DPS player and you have like no resistance but tons of damage, but you're playing Fortitude and you can aggro and hold aggro from other DPSs, you're going to die very quickly and you'll just be a useless tank. Like, yeah, maybe you might have skill and you can dodge and learn the iframe and stuff, but you're just making life harder for yourself and making the risk higher of you dying and just failing as a tank, when you could just make life so much easier. Go full defense. Yes, have a little bit of attack, but go full defense, try and get HP up if you can, but prioritize defense and resistance, and just learn your rotation to hold aggro. Like, if you have Saki, she's a godsend for tanks. And then Lan works really well, and then Icarus will be coming out soon for it as well. Yeah, I've been waffling for like so much about my experience with tanking and how you should be tanking. Hopefully this explains to people a little bit better with how you should be tanking in this game, because it seems to be such a dead build in this game. Like, I do see some people playing tank, but whenever I've been in a party with them or I watch them play, I've seen them die from bosses, and then half the time I'm always, well no, not half the time, near enough all the time, I'm holding aggro, and then sometimes they steal aggro from me because they use a taunt, but the moment their taunt runs out, which is like 3 seconds it lasts for, I instantly steal that aggro back. Even if they got more damage than me, I'd be holding aggro for most of the time because my rotation with Saki, and then I've been using Lan for my taunt build. That, and she's just fun to use. But yeah, I'd be holding aggro. It's crazy. So yeah, I hope I see more people playing actually chunky, not dying tanks that can hold aggro in this game. Because it triggers me seeing DPSs trying to play tank, but kind of failing at it. I mean, I'm not like trying to diss anyone or have a go at them, but please play tank properly. That's me done with this. It's me done waffling.